这么些。
This video is going to provide an introduction to the boating navigation rules targeted towards the local recreational boater. As background to the navigation rules, we'll look at the different classes of vessels. All vessels can be organized into a set of classes, where the different classes have different privileges in terms of their operation on the water. We'll use a pyramid to relate the different classes of vessels. On the left side of the page is a privilege arrow that indicates that the class of vessels lower in the pyramid have less privilege than the class of vessels higher in the pyramid and need to avoid those vessels when operating. The class of vessels at the bottom of the pyramid, that is with the lowest of privileges, is power. Power vessels are vessels with mechanical propulsion, such as a runabout or a motorboat or sailboat with its engine on, or a dinghy with its engine on, or large powered vessels. The next class of vessels in the pyramid, located above power, is sail. Sail are vessels using wind power. Example of sail vessels include auxiliary sailboat with the engine off, a sailing dinghy, a windsurfer, a kiteboard, etc. The third class of vessels with higher privilege above sail and above power are muscle vessels. Muscle vessels are vessels using human propulsion. Examples include a rowboat, a kayak, a canoe, a dinghy with a not operating engine, a paddle boat, etc., and we can include swimmers in this group. So these three classes of vessels represent most of the vessels we'll see in our day-to-day boating. However, there are additional classes of vessels that aren't too common, so let's add an additional pyramid on top of the one we've just covered, and we'll discuss what those classes are. The first class of vessels in this new pyramid are fishing vessels. Fishing vessels are defined as commercial vessels actively engaged in fishing, where the fishing gear restricts the ability of the vessel to maneuver. Examples will include a vessel with a trawl, nets, lines, or other fishing gear deployed, a lobster boat working its parts, etc. This class of vessels does not include recreational pleasure boats out fishing for the afternoon and trailing a line or two, although it may be courteous for the boater to avoid such vessels. Above fishing is a class of vessels called Restricted Inability to Maneuver, or RAM. Vessels restricted inability to maneuver are vessels whose nature of work causes them to be restricted in their ability to maneuver. Now, we'll include in this class also vessels which are constrained by their draft, vessels that need deep water who are operating in a channel or an area of shallow water. Examples of this class of vessel include the Coast Guard buoy maintenance vessel, a working tugboat, a dredge, or any deep draft vessel operating in a channel. The last class of vessels, which are at the very top of the privilege pyramid, are vessels not under command. Examples of vessels not under command would include a vessel with a rudder problem, or a vessel with engine failure, or perhaps something like a vessel with the crew on strike. So here we have 6 different classes of vessels. Starting from the bottom with power, these vessels have the lowest privilege of operation on the water, going up through the 6 classes to the top, vessels not under command, which have the highest privilege. We have a ranking of vessels, all of which need to give right of way to the vessels which are above them in the hierarchy. So let's take a look at some of the key terms used in the navigation rules. The first is the stand-on vessel. The stand-on vessel is obligated to maintain her speed and course. The second is the give-way vessel. The give-way vessel is obligated to take action to avoid the stand-on vessel. And finally, what action is the give-way obligated to take? that action is an early and obvious change of course or speed or both. Note that the give-way vessel is not expected to wait until the last second to make a minor change of course to avoid the stand-on vessel. Its action is expected to be both early and obvious. To finish this introduction to the coal regs, I'd like to offer some advice about the navigation rules. The first piece of advice is always avoid a collision. In any circumstance where you find yourself the stand-on vessel and some operator of a give-way vessel is either not paying attention or unaware of the rules, always takes action to avoid a collision. Being right is never any compensation for the risk of damage to your boat or to your loved ones. The second piece of advice is always avoid large vessels in open water. This advice is sometimes referred to as the law of tonnage or might makes right. If you have a large commercial vessel bearing towards you, it can be prudent to just get out of their way. If possible, communicate with the vessel in Channel 13 to discuss what action you may be taking. You can check your AAS receiver or a phone app like Boat Beacon to get the name of the vessel and then have an appropriate conversation with the captain. Third piece of advice is, if you're the give-way vessel in a crossing situation, often the best way to give way is to turn your boat towards the stern of the crossing vessel and maintain that course pointed towards the stern of the crossing vessel as the vessel passes in front of you. By making this change of course, your action is clear and obvious to the stand-on vessel, and after the stand-on vessel has passed, you'll find yourself back on course, having only made a boat length or two of extra distance. This video is part 2 of our introduction to the International Collision Regulations, known as COLREGs. The video will cover the rules regarding the operation of power boats versus other power boats. If you've watched the overview for this series, you know that power boats are the bottom of the privilege chain of vessel classes and must give way to all other classes of vessels. So let's look at the boat navigation rules as they relate to power versus power vessels. We'll look at these rules in terms of a number of different circumstances. The first circumstances is when the paths of the two boats are crossing and there's a risk of a collision. In this case, the boat to starboard is the stand-on vessel. The boat to port is the give-way vessel. Now, how can you tell if a risk of a collision exists? You can determine if a risk of a collision exists by taking the bearing of the crossing boat. If that bearing stays constant over time, then there's a high chance of a collision. That's called a constant bearing. We call the area to the right or starboard side of the giveaway vessel its danger zone. If there's a vessel crossing in your danger zone and the risk of a collision exists, the giveaway vessel must take giveaway action. So this danger zone actually covers an arc of 112.5 degrees to starboard. If we add our running lights to this picture, we can see that the danger zone is actually the same area to starboard that is covered by the green running light. At night, if you see a single red running light, you are a giveaway vessel. That's true regardless of whether the other vessel is a sail or a power vessel. Conversely, if you see a single green running light with the white masthead light, you are the stand-on vessel. Of course, should you see a green running light without the white masthead light, then you're a giveaway vessel, as the other vessel is a sailing vessel. Now, the giveaway vessel should take early and obvious action to avoid the stand-on vessel. And the actions can include turning to port, turning to starboard, changing speed. Should the stand-on vessel decide that the giveaway vessel is not taking appropriate action to avoid a collision, then it should take its own action. Its action can include turning to starboard or changing speed so as to avoid a collision. However, it should not turn to port, as turning to port increases the chance that the two boats will turn into each other. The next circumstance we might look at is a head-on approach, where we have two vessels heading directly towards each other. In this circumstance, both vessels are giveaway vessels. There is not a stand-on vessel involved. We have two giveaway vessels, and each vessel must give way by turning to its starboard so that the vessels pass port to port. At night, in a head-on situation, you would see the red and green running lights plus the white masthead light. These lights indicate that you are a giveaway vessel and must give way to starboard. If there is no white masthead light, then the vessel approaching you is a sailboat and you are still the giveaway vessel. And the final circumstance to look at is the overtaking circumstance, where one vessel is coming up from astern of the second vessel. In this case, the overtaking vessel is the giveaway vessel. The vessel being overtaken is stand-on. The overtaking vessel can give way by turning to port or to starboard. If we add our navigation lights, we see the key light in this case is the stern light of the vessel that's being overtaken. This white light covers an arc of 135 degrees. And if your vessel is within the arc of this light, then you are the overtaking vessel and must give way to the vessel ahead of you. Thank you for watching our video. This video is the third part of our Introduction to Coal Rigs series, and will cover the rules regarding sailing vessels. We know from our Part 1 introduction video that sail vessels as a class have higher privilege than power vessels as a class, but less than muscle and other vessel classes above muscle. We'll look at the sail versus sail rules in a variety of different circumstances. The first circumstance is overtaking. As with power versus power, the overtaking boat is the giveaway boat. It can turn to port or starboard to avoid the boat being overtaken, and it is the giveaway boat even if the boat being overtaken is on a different tack, or if the boat being overtaken is a power boat. This is the one exception to the general rule between sail and power. For the next two circumstances, we're going to add the direction of the wind to the top of the page, because for both of those circumstances, the direction of wind plays a role in determining which vessel is give way and which is stand on. So let's look at our next circumstance. In this circumstance, we have two sailboats that are on different tacks. One boat is on starboard tack, with the wind on its right side. The second boat is on port tack with the wind on its left side. In the case of two boats on different tacks, the boat on starboard is the stand-on vessel, the boat on port is the give-way vessel, and this rule is usually remembered as starboard over port. The port tack boat needs to give way by either tacking and going the same direction as the starboard tack boat, or by bearing off and sailing beneath the starboard tack boat. The third circumstance to consider is when two sailboats are on the same tack. In this example, we have two boats that are both on port tack. If two boats are on the same tack, then the boat to leeward, or further from the wind, is the stand-on vessel, the boat to windward is the give-way vessel, and this rule is usually remembered as leeward over windward. In this circumstance, the windward vessel needs to take give-way action and can do so by heading up to pass in front of the leeward vessel or bearing off to pass behind the leeward vessel, being of course careful to avoid an accidental jibe if they take that action.
Today I'm going to give you some tips on how to tie and teach the bowline. And a lot of people use the story of a rabbit, a hole in the ground, and the tree to visualize the bowline and to teach the bowline. And I think that's a great story, so I'm going to use the same story today, but I'm going to give you a little bit more detail and a few more tips. Now remember, it's all in the setup, so we're going to start by setting it up correctly. So here's my bowline. And as you can see here, you're trying to make a loop in the end of your rope. So remember, that's your goal. The other thing you can notice about this bowline is that it's made of two loops that cam on each other. My tail's a little short, but two loops that cam on each other. You've got this loop around here, the collar or the life jacket, because it kind of looks like a little person in a life jacket. And you've got the belt, that loop. So the two loops pull against each other, and that's what keeps your bowline tied. So if you're trying to make a loop in the end of your rope, first I want you to visualize that loop. And here I've laid it out on this cushion here. So if we're going to use the rabbit story as a teaching method, which is a great teaching method, it's very memorable, you have to start by making the rabbit hole. Now there's a lot of ways you can make the rabbit hole, but there's only one correct way to do it. So for example, if you said make a loop in your line, you have to remember that this is not a loop. A loop actually crisscrosses, and here's the correct loop. Now how do I know this one's correct? Because it's on the inside of my greater loop that I'm trying to make, and because this part we're going to imagine as the tree. If we've got a bunny rabbit, a hole in the ground in the tree, we're going to imagine this part as the tree, and the tree's roots go underneath the ground. This is the hole in the ground. It goes underneath, so you can see that this part crosses underneath. So let me show you of a loop that might not be quite right. This wouldn't be right. It's on the outside and it doesn't cross underneath. So we don't want to make that loop. Another one that we don't want to make is this one. Yes, it is on the inside, but the part that we're calling our tree, which is always the standing part, not the working part, crosses on top. So we want to make sure to set it up correctly every time. It is all about the setup. If you get the setup right, you're on the right track. If you get the setup wrong, No matter what you do correctly after that, it's not going to be right. So let's visualize it this way. Now once you've got your loop, you can just pinch it here so you don't lose it. Then we're going to imagine this, the very bitter end, to be our bunny rabbit. And the bunny rabbit is underground. He lives underground, right? So he comes up the rabbit hole from the underside, and we've already decided that this is the tree. So the rabbit comes up the hole. Now here's where I see another frequent mistake, is that people think it's a knot, so let's tie it tight. Well, already there, you have to remember that you're trying to make a loop in the end of your rope. So you want to maintain that loop so you don't pull it tight. The rabbit comes up the hole, goes around the tree. And there's often where mistake number 2 is. A lot of times I see people go around the tree this way. If we go around the tree this way, we're crossing over multiple lines to get there. Let's keep our bunny rabbit lazy and go the easiest, quickest way around the tree. And then he dives back down the hole. He doesn't come back up the hole. He's already come up it, so he has to dive back down the hole. Then you pull the rabbit and the tree away from each other, and the 2 loops cam on each other, and there you've got your loop in the end of your rope. And again, it looks like a little person in a life jacket with the waistband on. Let me show you another common mistake that I see. If you do decide to come up the hole and go around the tree the other way, it's not the end of the world. It'll still probably hold together, but you've got your tail on the outside. And like I said, it's not the end of the world. The problem is this could get caught on things maybe if it's dragging across the deck or something like that. And it's just style points. You know, you wouldn't just iron the front side of your shirt and not the back side of your shirt. So you might as well do it right, do it with style, make sure it looks good, and that it's perfect. Why bother tying it if it's not perfect? Okay, I'm gonna break it down for you one more time. We'll take it slow once again. Remember, it's all in the setup. So if you're trying to make a loop in the end of your rope, I'm gonna first visualize that loop. So I'm tying my bowline right here to make this loop in the end of my rope. I'm gonna remember the story of the rabbit, the bunny rabbit, the tree, and the hole in the ground, and first start by making the hole in the ground. Just like that. And how do I know that my hole in the ground is correct? I know it's correct because it's inside my loop, and because the tree's roots go underneath the ground. Therefore, I've turned my loop the right way. And I'll just pinch here to hold it tight. Then, got my bunny rabbit. He's gonna come up the hole, go around the tree, and he goes back down the hole. And I'm not pulling this tight. I'm maintaining that loop. He's gonna go back down the hole. Then I pull the rabbit and the tree away from each other. And this tightens up here, and I've still got my loop. There's your bowline. So that isn't the only way to tie the bowline. There's a whole bunch of other ways. But I think that if you learn it once, one way, and practice it a lot, then you'll start to get used to how the lines turn around each other, and you'll be able to figure out all the other ways all on your own. And the important thing is that instead of just learning, make a loop, up the hole around the tree, if you really learn how the loop is supposed to be turned, then you'll be able to tie your bowline facing this way, from this direction, from that direction, all over the place, because you'll be able to see the relationship of the bigger picture with the details of the loop and the rabbit and that sort of thing. So this was my jib sheet, and oftentimes we put stopper knots at the end of our jib sheet. I want to give you one quick tip. A lot of times people use a figure-8 knot, which I think is a great stopper knot. It's better than an overhand knot, and the reason it's better than an overhand knot is because when you get a lot of tension on it, you can still untie it by bending it like this. An overhand knot, when you get a lot of tension, becomes really difficult. You need a marlin spike to untie it, or maybe that even won't work. So a figure-8 knot is a good knot for a stopper knot at the end of a jib sheet. But my tip today is, instead of putting it at the end, put it 2 feet from the end, like about here. And the reason for that is, if the jib were to run out and this were to go all the way to the block, you'd still have a couple feet to get your hands on it and pull on it and retrieve that sheet. If you had the knot right at the end of your rope, you'd be working with just an inch or two and 2 fingers to try to grab it. So give yourself some space. Okay, the bowline is a great knot, but there are a few more knots that I think are actually more useful on a sailboat. We only use the bowline aboard a Rocinante for one or two things, but we use a few other knots a lot more often. And you can find out about those at this link.